And then some drawbacks are that you don't know how serious the students might take like their writing. They might just write something to write it down. And just because they write it down doesn't mean they necessarily understand what they're writing. They might just be writing it because they think they need to put something there. And if it's an online journal, then students can't necessarily draw or sketch what they are seeing, like if it's in a science class, sketching an experiment or anything. And then students might put too much about how they feel into the subject, and you would have to kind of sort through all of their thought process to find what they actually mean. And it's also a little bit time consuming if you're reading every single journal from each student.
Good, good. I know that journal writing, online journal writing used to be part of my methods classes a few years ago. And I dropped that from my classes. And I dropped it because my students suggested that they felt as though they were spending a lot of time writing journal entries. I felt like I was spending a lot of time reading the journal entries, and I'm not sure I was gaining that much, and they felt like they were just spending a lot of time just to put a few thoughts on paper. They're spending a lot of time, I'm spending a lot of time. I'm not sure it's assessing them any better than other ways I was already doing it, so I dropped the assignment. You know, so in some cases it's really useful, and in other cases it's not. You got to decide: is it worth it? You know, is it a good way to collect data? Audio recordings.
The pros, we thought that the most obvious thing about them is that you can play back the same thing over and over again. So if you need to kind of really dissect something that's going on in your classroom, it's like an unlimited, like being able to look at data from a survey, you can continue to listen to it. It's also really easy to listen to, so whether you're, instead of sitting down and going through tons of pages of notes, you can just kind of listen to what's going on in your classroom. And then also, as you're listening to like several different tapes from like over time, you'd be able to see, I don't know, hear different patterns that are kind of happening in a classroom that you might not hear when you're day-to-day just kind of doing your job and being a teacher. But you'll get to kind of notice those things.
Good.
And then some of the drawbacks we have is that you can't actually see the behavior that's happening. So if somebody said something, you don't know what they did with while they said that. You also can't always put a voice to the name, because there are those students that you just don't know their voice, and then there's some students that you really do know their voice. So for those students that you don't know their voice, you can't say who claimed that. And also, you can't always hear everything that is said for those really quiet students that just aren't able to be heard on a video recording or audio.
Okay, good. I mean, as we speak, John is videotaping this class, right? So we have it preserved. Probably some people are going to be able to be heard a lot better than other people on the videotape. So just because we're videoing it or audio taping doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be able to tell who said what and be able to hear it strongly enough to be able to analyze it.
If you decide to videotape or audio record anything in your classroom, do you need to get permission from each of the parents before you were to do any of those things?
Yeah, you do. And so there is a standard form. There's actually different ways this can be done. Most school districts now have a form that parents fill out at the beginning of the year that covers everything for everybody. It would be sort of a generic form the parents sign at the beginning of the year, and it says anytime that a student, teacher, or observer or whatever wants to audio tape or videotape, it's okay, and they just sign off. But what we find is sometimes people get into a school and you're doing the EDTL or doing classroom research, and that school doesn't have a blanket form. You do have to have students sign off to do it. I know that for my 8th grade class, I have a form at the beginning of the year that I always give my students. They have to sign and their parents have to sign saying it's okay for me to video or audio tape them, and I know I'm covered for the year. If a student doesn't want to be recorded, then there are ways of dealing with that too. So you sit them at a different table. And I have done that. So for example, you got a class of 25 students and you've got 4 kids whose parents won't sign off. It's okay. When the day that we're audio or videotaping, excuse me, you're audio taping the class, I'm going to put those 4 students at a separate table. You know, not to single them out. Nobody has to know why they're at that table. I'm arranging the students in different ways, and I'm going to take the camera and shoot it like this and go back and forth. I just don't put the camera on that table at all, and so they're not in the videotape. So there are real easy ways to get around that if you need to. Ordinarily, my experience has been parents very rarely ever won't sign off, and students too. And it's kind of, there's nothing lost, right? I mean, you're going to record it, and it's going to help that person become a better teacher. Why wouldn't I sign it? So very infrequently do parents not sign this, but they do once in a while, and it's okay if they do. You know, we just have ways we work around it.
So you've done like classes where they're like, oh, these a couple kids don't want to get videotaped, so you just like put them off to the side. Like, how do you go about saying that? Like, oh hey, we're gonna switch class up today. You two sit in the back, and then everyone else is good.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go about that without like being like disrespectful to those kids?
Yeah, so the kids don't know, nobody in the room knows who signed the form and who didn't. In fact, by the time you actually do videotaping, sometimes they've even forgotten that they filled the form out. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start class off and say, okay, we're gonna get in some groups today and do an activity. Like this morning, I had my 8th graders doing they were tossing M&Ms out of a cup and counting how many M's came up and putting them back in the cup and doing all kinds of stuff. All right, so they're doing that activity. At the beginning of class today, I said, I want so-and-so, I want these 3 people at this table, I want the 4 of you at that table, and I just move them around the room, right? I do that kind of routinely in my class. So if I'm gonna be videotaping that day, I might just come in and say, Nick, I want you and so-and-so and so-and-so at this table, and you 3 here, I want you 4 there, and so forth. We're gonna do this activity together. I'm gonna do a little bit of videotaping of what we do today too. And I'm gonna have the video camera sitting over here. Now I know, or the person who's using the camera knows not to videotape that table. But that table may not even realize that they're not being videotaped. So I didn't single them out and say, you guys go over there, everybody else stay where you are. I actually moved the whole class around, and I'm just videotaping like this, back and forth, zooming in, but I just don't go over and catch that table. They don't even realize that they're not being videotaped. Nobody else in the class would even know it. And unless you specifically remember, gee, I was one of those people that didn't sign the form, I wonder if he's one, which they don't think about. Nobody even notices it. And I've done that.
What about for audio? Like what if they answer a question or something?
Yeah, that one is a little trickier because if you're audio taping, they're inevitably going to be in the tape. My experience on that has been that I have not asked permission for audio taping. I've only asked it for videotape. Because audio taping is one of those things where you really, well, somebody who mentioned that you might not, I think it was you, Kim, you may not actually know who is speaking in the tape anyway. So sometimes it's kind of hard to hear somebody. The only exception would be if you were going to, let's suppose that you were working in small groups and you got the class in 5 groups of 4, and you want to put a recording device on each of the tables and record their conversation as a group. It's inevitable that everybody's going to have to be recorded. And so one of the things that you could do if you were in a position where you had to get permission for that, and I ordinarily, if I'm audio recording, I don't, but if you did, then you could also say to parents, your child is going to be on that audio tape, but when I transcribe it and do it, the names are never going to go out, and we won't be able to identify who's speaking at the table anyway, because there's no camera on you, it's an audio recording. So the chances of ever being able to show somebody that your child said this is almost 0, you know. So I just don't worry so much about audio recordings, and a lot of teachers do that. A lot of teachers just want to know, you know, doing kind of some self-reflection on their teaching. They'll just click a recorder and their iPhone or something, and just sit it on their desk and then teach their regular class, and then go back later and listen to the audio tape and see how the conversation went, etc. Kids don't even really need to know that you turned a recorder on. You're not taking it outside the classroom, you're not doing research with it, you're not going to be sharing it with anybody, it's just for you. It's not a big deal. But if you're going to put a camera on somebody, you do have to ask them for permission on that. So we'll actually talk a little bit more about that. When we get together in January, we have a person from the Human Subjects Review Board who's going to be here with us, and she's the one that deals with that in her job every day. What do you actually have to get permission for, and what is it okay if you don't have permission and you just do it? And one of the things that she will tell you is that a big decision maker is, what are you actually doing with the data? Am I collecting data so that I can transcribe it, quote somebody, publish an article, and put it out there about what these students did? Or am I just doing it to improve my classroom teaching practice? I want to know how well this activity is going over. I'm going to audio videotape you. And if the purpose for it is to improve practice, it's kind of a different ballgame. You know, the permission I have from Human Subject for my 8th grade class is a higher level of permission that allows me to take anything I do with them and use it any way I want to. And so parents have to sign off on that. And it's pretty cool, because then when the students solve a problem, they come up with a solution in a particular way, and I'll say, that's really good stuff. And I'll take a picture of that or scan it and use it in a presentation. John and I did a presentation at the OCTM conference where I used a couple examples of student work that came from my class this year, because I give my students a problem with this. It's really cool the way she set that up. I'm going to use it in the presentation. I have permission to do that. But if I were to take that student's paper, make a copy of it, and use it at a conference, or put it in a book or an article that I'm writing, and then a parent saw it later and knew that it was their child's work and they had never signed off, we got problems. So you have to cover your tracks that way. So it's a lot of just the intent of what are you gonna do with the data. And so the audio recording is in kind of a different category that way than the video recording is. So video, what's the video?
So similar to audio recording, video recording gives the teacher time afterwards to reflect on their teaching experience. And then also during a video recording, the teacher has the chance to identify students' nonverbal behaviors and their location movement across the classroom. And then also the teacher has a chance to kind of get a sense of the overview of their actual performance, because as when you're teaching, you don't actually know personally what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right per se. But after watching the video, you get a chance to actually know what was happening.
Good.
And then some cons are that it creates an unreal environment, because like when people know they're being videotaped, they act differently. Like the teacher will act differently and the students will act differently. And then it could be expensive, like if your school doesn't have a camera and you don't have one personally, like how do you get like a decent enough one that you could hear people talking? Because if you just use like your phone, it probably wouldn't be that effective. And then it's sometimes hard to quantify because you're just like listening to a classroom conversation. If it goes like off topic, then you won't really like have what you wanted to get. So.
Good. So Catherine's comments here make me think of something else. And I know I've told you this before, but I'll say it again. And that is, if there is any expense associated with doing your research in the field, we cover that. Okay, you pay a course fee to take 3160 and 4160. You don't, but Choose Ohio First does. And so we collect a course fee money from the grant to pay for things like that. So don't be held back by expenses. If you were to say, for example, I'd really like to, videotape my class from 3 different angles, but that would require 3 good cameras, and I don't even own one, and so that would be really expensive. I guess I can't do that kind of study. Sure you can. Just let us know. We've already got a couple. If we need to buy a third, we will. That's what the money's there for. Okay. Or sometimes we've had people say, well, I'd really like to give my students an attitudes and beliefs survey, and there's a classic one on the market we ran into in the research, but it costs $5 a person to administer it. I got 20 kids in the classes, it cost $100. I'm not gonna spend $100 out of my pocket to do this. No, you shouldn't, but we've got $100 for you. We will pay for it for you if you wanna do that survey. So just don't let expenses hold you back, within reason, obviously. We can't have $1 million here, but we got some. So, but if you're in a situation where you say, I really would like to do this, but it might be expensive, let us know. We've probably been down that road before and already either bought that equipment or have money set aside to make that kind of thing happen for you. Okay? And that brings us to the last category, which is looking at pre-existing data in the files.
Well, some of the things that are advantages are basically just like it is qualitative, like probably the only thing in there are standardized tests, maybe some observations, but probably not likely. So it'll be very easy to compare, very easy to organize and draw conclusions from that based on that data, based on the numbers. You also get a better understanding of students, because that's something that started when they come to school. So you've got years of what their scores were like, so you can have a better idea of how they performed academically.
Good.
And how they developed.
So our cons were most likely it's like standardized testing, so it's all the same type and conditions. So if they're not good at standardized testing, you don't really have a good, accurate view of what they were capable of. Also, it's not consistent state to state, so if you have kids that are frequently moving in and out and transferring schools, you're not really going to understand what exactly you're looking at or what that meant when they were at that school. And also it provides a limited view of the students' capabilities.
Yeah, limited just a few numbers that we have kind of in the files type deal. So yeah, and sometimes we're biased by pre-existing data, we're biased by what other people say to us, biased by things that we see. So when I start the school year, just a tip for new teachers, one of the things I try not to do is to go back in the files and familiarize myself with how that student did in the past. I kind of don't really want to know at first. Because we can bias ourselves. So my experience has been go into the classroom, teach the students for a while, and if I have somebody who's really starting to struggle, we've been 3-4 weeks into the school year, April seems to be a little bit behind everybody else, and so I'm starting to wonder, is April behind everybody else in other classes too, or is this just my class? And